You're shivering in your tent. The temperature has dropped to 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Your instinct screams at you to pile on every blanket you brought. Cotton, fleece, that heavy comforter from your closet. You wrap yourself like a burrito, feeling instantly warmer. Within 3 hours, you might be fighting for your life. That cozy feeling you trust is actually setting a trap that kills experienced campers every single winter. The blanket isn't saving you. It's creating the perfect conditions for hypothermia. Stay with me because what I'm about to show you will completely flip everything you think you know about staying warm. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the US military banned certain blankets from Arctic operations and what they use instead. Here's the physics that nobody tells you. When you get cold, your body does something automatic. It shivers, it burns calories, it generates heat through muscle contractions. You start sweating even in freezing temperatures. Now here's where the death trap activates. Most blankets, especially cotton and cheap fleece, are moisture magnets. They absorb your sweat like a sponge. You don't notice it happening because you feel warm at first. The trapped air pockets in the blanket fibers are doing their job, holding heat close to your skin. But every exhale, every microscopic bead of sweat, every bit of moisture from your skin is saturating those fibers. Cotton can absorb up to 27 times its weight in water. Once it's wet, it becomes a refrigerator wrapped around your body. The turning point happens around hour 2 or 3. You've stopped shivering because your body thinks the blanket is working. Your core temperature starts to drop. The wet fabric now conducts heat away from your skin 25 times faster than dry air would. You don't feel the danger because hypothermia is a liar. It doesn't announce itself with sharp pain. It whispers. It makes you drowsy. It makes you feel almost drunk. Your judgment fails. You think you're fine. You think you just need to sleep it off. People have been found frozen to death under piles of blankets, and the autopsy reports always show the same thing. The blankets were soaked through with condensation and sweat. The Alaskan Wilderness Guides call this the wet-cold equation. There's a simple test that most people fail. Take your blanket outside on a freezing night. Breathe on it heavily for 30 seconds. Feel the moisture? Now, imagine 8 hours of that. Your breath alone can dump nearly a pint of water vapor into your sleeping environment every single night. Add body sweat, and you're creating a humidity chamber. In sub-freezing temperatures, that moisture doesn't evaporate. It just sits there, clinging to the fabric, waiting to steal your body heat the moment your internal furnace slows down. Have you ever woken up freezing in the middle of the night, even though you went to bed warm? Write your answer in the comments. The military figured this out the hard way during the Korean War. Soldiers were dying in their sleep, wrapped in standard-issue cotton blankets. The gear worked fine in temperate climates, but in the frozen mountains of Korea, those same blankets became death shrouds. Field autopsies revealed that the blankets weren't just wet, they were frozen solid against the soldiers' skin. The Army conducted emergency tests and discovered something that changed cold weather doctrine forever. A wet cotton blanket at 20 degrees Fahrenheit will drop your core body temperature faster than sleeping with no blanket at all. At least with no blanket, your body heat escapes into the air. With a wet blanket, you're locked in thermal contact with frozen fabric that's actively extracting heat from your core. The solution they developed is brilliantly simple, but goes against every comfort instinct you have. They created the layer isolation system. Instead of one thick blanket, they used multiple thin layers with air gaps between them. The key was using materials that stayed functional when wet. Wool became the base layer. Not because it's warmer than cotton, but because it has a supernatural property. Wool fibers are covered in microscopic scales and coated in lanolin, a natural wax. When wool gets wet, those fibers actually generate heat through a chemical process called adsorption. The water molecules bind to the protein structure of the wool and release thermal energy. It's not much, maybe 2 or 3 degrees, but in a survival situation, that's the difference between your body maintaining homeostasis and sliding into hypothermia. On top of the wool, they added a vapor barrier. This sounds counterintuitive. Why would you want to trap moisture? Because if you're going to be wet anyway, it's better to keep that moisture as liquid close to your warm skin than to let it migrate outward where it will freeze and conduct cold back to you. A simple plastic sheet or even a trash bag worn between your wool base layer and your outer insulation creates a microclimate. Your skin stays damp, but warm. The outer layers stay dry and functional. This is the exact same principle used in modern vapor barrier liners that cost $80. but you can hack it with a $2 emergency blanket or a garbage bag. If you're getting value from this, hit that subscribe button and smash the like. This kind of information could save your life, and it helps us reach more people who need to hear it. The final layer is where most people make their second fatal mistake. They use a sleeping bag or a puffy blanket as the outer shell. Wrong. What you need is a windproof, breathable barrier. Wind is a convection thief. It doesn't care how many blankets you're wrapped in. If air can move across the surface of your insulation, it strips away the warm boundary layer your body is trying to maintain. A single layer of canvas, a tarp, or even a cheap painter's plastic drop cloth positioned to block the wind can increase your effective warmth by 15 degrees. The military uses this in combination with a simple tactic. They don't heat the whole tent. They heat the smallest possible airspace. Soldiers curl into a fetal position, pull their knees to their chest, and wrap the layered system tight around that compressed form. You're not trying to keep a 6-foot-tall cylinder of air warm. You're maintaining a 2-inch microclimate of warm air next to the parts of your body that matter: your core, your head, and your major blood vessels. But here's the piece that ties it all together, and it's something most survival guides skip entirely. You cannot manage cold with gear alone. You have to manage the fuel. Your body is an engine. Engines need fuel to produce heat. When you sleep, your metabolism drops. Your internal furnace dims to about 60% capacity. If you go to bed without eating, your body will start cannibalizing muscle tissue around 2 a.m. to keep your core temperature stable. This is called metabolic hypothermia, and it's why you can freeze to death under a mountain of blankets if your stomach is empty. The fix is simple but disciplined. Eat fat and protein before you sleep. Not sugar, not carbohydrates. Those burn fast and crash hard. You need dense, slow-burning fuel. A handful of nuts, a piece of hard cheese, even a spoonful of peanut butter will keep your internal furnace stoked through the coldest part of the night, which statistically occurs between 3 and 5 a.m. There's a field test that backcountry rangers use to check if someone understands this. They ask, "What's the first thing you do when you start feeling cold?" The wrong answer is, "Add another blanket." The right answer is, "Check if I'm wet, check if I'm eating, and check if I'm blocking the wind." Blankets are passive. They don't generate anything. They only reflect what you're already producing. If your body isn't producing heat because you're dehydrated, exhausted, or starving, no amount of fabric will save you. This is why experienced survivalists treat their body like a wood stove. They keep it fed. They keep it dry. They manage the airflow. The blanket is just the outer shell of the stove, not the fire itself. Let's talk about moisture management in detail because this is where the science gets specific. When you exhale, you're releasing air that's been warmed to 98.6 degrees and saturated with moisture to nearly 100% humidity. In freezing conditions, that warm, wet air hits the cold inner surface of your blanket and immediately condenses. If you're using cotton or synthetic fleece, that condensation soaks into the fibers. Over the course of a night, you can easily deposit 4 to 6 ounces of water into your blankets just from breathing. Add in the sweat from normal metabolic activity, and you're looking at half a pound of water trapped in the fabric by morning. That's why people wake up cold and damp even though they went to bed dry and warm. The blanket has become a cold, wet compress. The military solution is ruthless in its simplicity. If you can't stop the moisture, redirect it. Wool against the skin wicks moisture away from your body and holds it in the fiber structure where it generates a small amount of heat. The vapor barrier traps that moisture before it can migrate outward. The outer windproof layer prevents convection from accelerating evaporative cooling. But there's one more trick that ties it all together: ventilation. You need to leave a small gap, usually near your face, where moisture-heavy air can escape. If you seal yourself completely, you're building a sweat lodge. If you leave everything open, you're bleeding heat. The sweet spot is a 1 to 2 inch vent positioned downwind so the cold air doesn't blast directly onto your skin. This lets the humid air escape without creating a convective cooling pathway. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. Most people reading this are thinking, "I'm not going to war, I'm just camping." Fair enough. But the physics don't care about your intentions. Cold is cold. Moisture is moisture. Conduction, convection, radiation, and evaporation operate the same way whether you're in a foxhole in Korea or a campsite in Colorado. The difference is that soldiers are forced to learn these lessons because their lives depend on it. Recreational campers usually have the option to bail out, drive home, or call for rescue. But every year, people die in situations they thought were survivable because they trusted the wrong gear. They trusted a thick blanket. They trusted a temperature rating on a sleeping bag. They didn't trust the physics. Here's a real-world scenario. You're winter camping. You brought your favorite down comforter from home because it's incredibly warm. The first night is fine. You sleep well. The second night, there's unexpected rain mixed with snow. Your tent has a small leak. The comforter gets damp. You think it's no big deal. You'll dry it out tomorrow. But tomorrow doesn't come with sunshine. It comes with another storm. Now you're stuck with a wet down blanket. Down is an incredible insulator when dry, but when wet, it's worse than useless. The feathers clump together, losing all loft. The wet clumps conduct heat away from your body. You're colder with the wet down blanket than you would be with nothing at all. If you'd brought a wool blanket and a cheap plastic tarp, you'd be warm and dry. The wool would still insulate even when damp. The tarp would block the wind and shed the rain. Total cost, maybe $30 compared to a $200 down comforter that becomes a liability the moment it gets wet. The lesson isn't that blankets are bad. The lesson is that blind trust in any single piece of gear is dangerous. You need a system. You need redundancy. You need to understand what each layer is doing and what happens when it fails. A blanket is just one component. It's not a magic shield. It's not a guarantee. It's a tool that works only when used correctly, in combination with other tools and tactics. The final piece of this puzzle is knowing when to abandon the blanket entirely. There's a survival principle called tactical discomfort. Sometimes being slightly cold and dry is safer than being warm and wet. If your blanket is soaked and you can't dry it, take it off. Use it as ground insulation to get yourself off the cold earth, but don't wrap it around your body. Put on every dry layer you have, even if it's just a rain jacket and a spare shirt. Block the wind with a tarp. Curl into a tight ball to minimize surface area. Eat some food to stoke your internal fire. You'll be uncomfortable, but you'll be alive. Comfort kills when it tricks you into ignoring the physics of heat loss. So here's the action plan. Stop buying gear based on how cozy it feels in the store. Start building systems based on how they handle failure. Wool-based layers, vapor barriers, windproof shells, food in your belly, dry ground insulation. These aren't optional luxuries. These are the fundamentals that separate cold from dead. The next time you're packing for a cold weather trip, don't ask yourself, quote 5. Ask yourself, quote 6. If you don't have an answer, you're not ready. Remember that question from earlier? Have you ever woken up freezing in the middle of the night, even though you went to bed warm? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this video changed the way you think about cold weather survival, hit that subscribe button. This is the kind of knowledge that doesn't go viral, but it saves lives. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Stay warm, stay smart, and thanks for watching.